The evening sun poured through the windows of Harbor Diner, painting everything in shades of amber and gold. Thomas Mitchell sat in a worn leather booth, his tailored suit feeling out of place against the cracked vinyl. Across from him, his daughter Emma, barely 7 years old, swung her legs beneath the table, her patent leather shoes catching the light. This wasn't their usual spot. Thomas had built an empire in commercial real estate, the kind of success that meant reservations at restaurants with names you couldn't pronounce. But Emma had begged to come here, drawn by the old jukebox in the corner and the promise of chocolate milkshakes. Thomas loosened his tie and smiled at his daughter. These moments had become rare. Late meetings, overseas calls, deals that couldn't wait. His wife, Sarah, had started asking when he'd be home for dinner. Emma had stopped asking. Tonight was supposed to be different. The waitress brought their order, and Thomas watched Emma's eyes light up at the towering burger and golden fries. He'd forgotten how simple joy could be, how uncomplicated. That's when Emma's attention shifted. At the table next to them sat a young woman, maybe 30, with tired eyes and gentle hands. Her son, about Emma's age, sat quietly beside her, his clothes clean but worn thin the edges. On the table between them sat a small stack of coins. The woman counted them carefully, her lips moving with each quarter and dime. Thomas saw her shoulders drop slightly. She said something soft to her son, something about sharing a meal. The boy nodded without complaint, the kind of understanding that comes too early for some children. Emma had stopped eating. Her small hand rested on the table, frozen halfway to a French fry. She was watching them with an intensity that made Thomas's chest tighten. "Dad," Emma whispered, tugging his sleeve. "Dad, look." "I see them, sweetheart. Eat your dinner." But Emma didn't move. Her gaze stayed fixed on the boy, on the way he tried to smile at his mother, on the weight of worry in the woman's face. "Dad," Emma said again, louder this time. "Can I share with them?" The question hung in the air between them. Thomas felt the familiar urge to deflect, to protect his daughter from uncomfortable truths, to hurry through this moment and return to their comfortable life. "Emma, they're fine. Let them have their privacy." "But, Dad, they don't have enough money." I can hear her counting. "We have so much food." Thomas glanced at his plate, barely touched. At Emma's meal, enough for 2 kids her size. His daughter was right. They had more than enough. "Sweetheart, it's not that simple. We can't just..." "Why not?" Emma's voice rose slightly, drawing a quick glance on the woman at the next table. "You always tell me to be kind. You say if we can help someone, we should." His own words, thrown back at him. Thomas remembered saying them, probably distracted, probably rushing out the door to another meeting. He hadn't realized Emma was listening. Children always listen more than you thought. He looked at his daughter, really looked at her. At 7 years old, she saw the world more clearly than he did. No calculations about appropriateness or pride or the complicated dance of charity. Just one person who could help another person who needed it. "Please, Dad," Emma said, her small hand finding his. "We have to." The woman at the next table had settled on something, speaking quietly to the waitress. Thomas caught fragments. One kid's meal, water for her. Could they split it? The waitress nodded kindly, understanding passing between them without judgment. Thomas felt something crack open in his chest, something that had been sealed shut for years. When had he become so removed? When had success built walls between him in moments like these? He thought of his own father, a factory worker who'd never had much but always found something to give. Sunday dinner stretched to feed neighbors. Christmas presents for kids whose parents had fallen on hard times. His father would know what to do here. "All right," Thomas said, his voice rougher than he intended. "All right, Emma, but we do this right, with respect." Emma's face blazed with joy, so bright it almost hurt to see. Thomas signaled the waitress, an older woman named Dorothy whose name tag was crooked. She'd probably been working since morning, her feet likely aching, her smile somehow still genuine. "Dorothy," he said quietly, "the family at the next table. I'd like to cover their meal, whatever they want. But please, don't tell them who's paying. Just say it's been taken care of." Dorothy's expression softened. She'd seen this before, maybe even been on the receiving end once. That's real kind of you. And Dorothy, can you bring the boy one of whatever desserts kids like? Ice cream or pie, or whatever you think. My daughter insists. Emma bounced in her seat, trying to contain her excitement. They watched as Dorothy approached the other table, leaning down to speak with the young mother. At first, confusion crossed the woman's face, then disbelief. Her hand went to her mouth. She shook her head, saying she couldn't possibly accept, but Dorothy was insistent with the gentle firmness of someone who understood pride and need. Finally, the woman nodded, her eyes glistening. She pulled her son close, whispering something in his ear. The boy's face transformed, breaking into a smile that could light up the whole diner. Emma watched all of this with rapt attention, her dinner forgotten. "Can I say hello?" she asked. Thomas hesitated, then nodded. Sometimes you had to let your children teach you. Emma slid out of the booth and walked to their table with the fearless kindness only children possess. "Hi," she said to the boy. "I'm Emma. Do you want to see something cool? They have a jukebox over there." The boy looked at his mother, who nodded through her tears. Within moments, the two children were at the old jukebox, Emma showing them how to press the buttons, their laughter mixing with the opening notes of a song from another era. The young mother turned to Thomas, her composure barely held together. "I don't know what to say. We've been having a hard time, and I promised David we'd do something special today. It's his birthday." The words hit Thomas like a physical blow. A birthday. This woman had been counting coins to give her son a birthday meal, and they'd almost not had enough. "You don't have to say anything," Thomas said. "We've all needed help sometime. I know I have." It was true. He'd forgotten, but it was true. Scholarships that made college possible. A boss who took a chance on him when he was nobody. Sarah's father co-signing their first apartment. He'd climbed high enough that he'd forgotten the hands that helped him up. "Your daughter is beautiful," the woman said, wiping her eyes. "You're raising her right." Thomas looked at Emma, watching her teach David how to work the jukebox, their heads bent together in concentration. "I think maybe she's raising me." They talked for a while, this young mother whose name was Rachel. She'd been a nurse before her hours got cut. David's father wasn't in the picture. She was doing her best, working 2 part-time jobs, trying to keep everything together. The kind of story that was more common than comfortable people wanted to admit. Thomas listened, really listened, in a way he hadn't listened to anyone in years. Not in meetings, not at home, not even to himself. When the meal came, Rachel and David ordered carefully, still conscious of cost despite Dorothy's assurance it was covered. Thomas asked Dorothy to add more, bringing enough food that Rachel could take leftovers home. A birthday cake appeared, candles blazing, and the whole diner sang while David's face glowed with happiness. Emma returned to their table, practically vibrating with joy. "Dad, David's really nice. He told me about his school. Can we do this again sometime? Can we help more people?" Thomas looked at his daughter, at this small person who just reminded him what mattered. "Yes," he said. "Yes, we can." Later, as they prepared to leave, Rachel approached their table. She pressed a small folded paper into Thomas's hand. "This is my number. When things get better for me, and they will, I want to pay it forward too. Maybe we can work together to help someone else." Thomas pocketed the paper, knowing he'd call her, not out of obligation, but because he wanted to, because Emma would ask about David, because this moment had changed something fundamental in him. Outside, Emma held his hand as they walked the car, the evening air warm and forgiving. "Dad, that felt really good. Why don't we do things like that more?" It was the simplest question and the hardest answer. Because he'd been busy. Because he'd forgotten. Because somewhere along the way, success had insulated him from the world he'd come from. "I don't know, Em, but we're going to change that." She squeezed his hand, satisfied with this promise. Thomas thought about the week ahead, the meetings he'd scheduled, the deals in motion. He thought about Sarah at home, probably wondering when they'd return. He thought about his father, gone 5 years now, who'd never owned a suit like the one Thomas wore, but had been richer in ways that mattered. That night, after Emma was asleep, Thomas sat in his home office, staring at spreadsheets that suddenly seemed less important. He thought about Rachel counting coins, about David's birthday, about Emma's immediate instinct to share what she had. He called his assistant and cleared his morning schedule. Then he started researching local charities, shelters, food banks, places where his resources could matter, where the distance between his life and lives like Rachel's could become something other than separation. When Sarah came in, he told her about the evening. She listened, tears forming, and said she wanted to be part of whatever came next. The next morning, Thomas found Emma in the kitchen, drawing a picture of the diner of two children by a jukebox. "I want to remember," she said simply. Thomas knelt beside her. "I want to remember too." Years later, Thomas would point to that evening as the moment everything changed, when his daughter's simple question opened a door he'd let close, when he remembered that wealth without compassion was just numbers on paper. But that night, sitting in his home office, he simply made a promise to be present, to pay attention, to let his daughter keep teaching him to see. Because sometimes it takes a child to remind us we're all just people sitting in diners, hoping to make it through with a little dignity and a lot of kindness. And sometimes that's enough. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe for more tales of hope and humanity. Leave a comment below sharing a time when a simple act of kindness made all the difference. Your stories matter and inspire us all.